It took my husband and I over 10 years to finally make the decision that we wanted to become parents. One of the biggest factors in that decision being me having rheumatoid arthritis, a chronic illness. For a long time, all I could really focus on were the hardships that I knew would come from being a parent with a chronic illness. But about a year ago, it really struck me one day, the similarities between parenthood and chronic illness. Despite the obvious differences, there are so many similarities between the two. And I began to realize maybe my chronic illness isn't the weakness I thought. Maybe it's actually one of my greatest strengths and could even be like a superpower as we enter this new season. I'm going to share with you the similarities I found, and then I will leave you with a little bit of hope. It's a lesson I've learned over the last 15 years that I am really clinging on to as I enter this new time of life. I want to preface this whole video by saying that making the decision to become a parent is or should be one of the hardest decisions you make in life, especially if you have a chronic illness. And I am 1000% in support of anyone who chooses not to become a parent because of their chronic illness. There are so many other factors that went into our decision making for us to finally be able to say yes. And if even one of those factors were off, we would not be on this journey. The first similarity I want to talk about is sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is obviously a huge facet of parenthood, but it is also a huge facet of chronic illness. I think it would be easy for a lot of parents who haven't experienced chronic illness to hear this and be like, y'all have no idea what it's like. You have no idea what you're in for. You don't know what it's like to be sleep deprived for years on end. And anyone who's had a chronic illness knows, I think we do know. The sleep deprivation that accompanies chronic illness is often caused by pain and serious physical limitations. It is incredibly depressing. There is no reward for it. And it's something that causes a great deal of loneliness because there are not many people in your life who know you're dealing with sleep deprivation. My one solace, knowing that I'm going to experience that again as a parent, is that at least there will be some degree of reward and fulfillment and joy from being sleep deprived because I'm taking care of my baby. I'm gonna be awake, I'm gonna be tired, I'm gonna be miserable, but I will be holding my baby. And that is very different than not being able to sleep because your body is fighting against you. The next similarity is a loss of identity. If you've lived with a chronic illness for any period of time, you've likely already encountered this dilemma, this push and pull between what the disease is doing to you and what you want for yourself and what you believe to be true about yourself. There's usually going to be some degree of having to give up hobbies. It could be as serious as giving up careers. The way that you interact with your children or your pets, the things that you do to keep yourself happy and sane might all of a sudden be no-goes because you physically are not able to do them. It can be incredibly difficult, and it can be a lifelong grieving process, having to let go of the things that you once thought made you you and figure out if you can incorporate them into your new life at all. And then also trying to discover new things that you can do that make you feel like you. It can be a lot. Parenthood can be very, very similar. All of a sudden, even for just a season, the things that made your life what it was are kind of upended, and things will have to change. Again, hobbies, careers, the routine of your day-to-day life, all of that gets upended, and you have to figure out how to function as yourself in this new normal. It's the really little things that you once took for granted about your day-to-day life and about how you present yourself to the world that all of a sudden just don't even feel like options. Next is a loss of physical autonomy. Chronic illnesses completely change your body's ability to do certain things. You experience physical limitations that get in the way of your autonomy. The things that you want to be doing, you literally can't. Also, this feeling like I don't have control over my body anymore. I want my body to do certain things and it's not doing it. Parenthood can bring up similar feelings, especially if you are someone who's breastfeeding your children. The feeling that like your body isn't your own anymore, that there's a child who is dependent upon you, that you can't just choose to go anywhere or do anything because there's a dependency all of a sudden on your physical body. And of course that translates into almost every other facet of parenthood. The next similarity is changing relationships. Having a chronic illness can change the way that your friends and family view you. It can change the way you interact with each other, the ways you spend time together. In some relationships, it can bring to light bigger issues, especially if you have a partner who is just completely unsupportive of you. And all of a sudden you feel like you're going through the hardest thing you've ever gone through alone. Parenthood can also shed light on these cracks in our relationship. I've heard a lot of parents say that you really learn like who's your friend and who isn't your friend when you become a parent. You learn who shows up for you and who doesn't show up for you, who is understanding of what you're going through and who just doesn't have time for it. I think it's very, very similar. There's also a dynamic I've seen with a lot of parents where maybe one parent is disappointed that the other is not showing up for parenthood the way they thought they would. The next one is kind of self-explanatory, but it's financial burdens. Being chronically ill is very expensive. From dealing with insurance to having to buy yourself medical supplies to maybe losing a job because of your chronic illness, experiencing the loss of income or a lowering of your income. That kind of financial burden is obviously felt as a parent where you have all of these new expenses and perhaps having a child has changed what your financial picture looks like. And the last similarity I'm going to talk about is just the heavy realization that it's forever. If you have an incurable chronic disease, that realization that it's forever, it's permanent, it's incurable, that's going to be a lifelong grieving process. It's a really difficult thing to wrap your mind around, and you kind of go through all of those steps, the bargaining, the anger, the acceptance. You go through all of that stuff again and again and again. It's still hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that in 30 years, I will still be dealing with rheumatoid arthritis in some capacity. I think that same realization of foreverness also hits parents. One moment your life looks a certain way, and literally in a split second, once that baby is born and you bring it home from the hospital, your life is different, not just for a while, but forever. And I'm sure that foreverness is a hard thing to come to terms with, especially in seasons when life is just so hard. But that leads me into the little nugget of hope I want to leave you with, which is that the most important lesson I've learned over the last 15 years is that everything changes. There aren't many constants in life, but the one constant we do have that is a guarantee is that things will change. You may not always know how they will change, whether it's for the good or the bad, but what you do know is that what you are experiencing today in this moment is not what you will be experiencing for the rest of your life. Circumstances may change, you may change, the people who come in and out of your life may change. One of the biggest reliefs I think parenthood can offer is the fact that your child will change because they have to grow up. They're not going to be a newborn forever. They're not going to be a toddler forever. They're not going to be a teenager forever. They will be with you, a part of you forever. But what that looks like is always going to be changing. And so I know that even when we find ourselves in the trenches of the newborn phase or the toddler phase, I know better than to wallow in the feeling of certainty that, oh my God, my life is ruined forever. I'm always going to be this tired. I'm always going to be this pulled apart in every direction. It's just not true. So I know that parenthood is going to be very different than anything I've ever experienced before, but knowing that I've already been through everything I just said makes me feel really empowered. But even though it'll be different, I know that I have the skills to get through it. I know what it's like to be sleep deprived. I know what it's like to live with financial uncertainty. I know what it's like to not know who I am anymore. I know what it's like to have to navigate relationships. I already know all those things. So even though it will be different, I feel like I'm gonna be able to do it. If you're a parent with a chronic illness, I hope that this video has made you feel validated in some way. If you are making the decision right now as to whether or not you want to be a parent, I hope this has been insightful to you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I would love to know your experience and what you think about all this, if I've missed the mark somehow, or if there are other similarities I haven't thought of. You can also email me at ellenwitharthritis@gmail.com anytime. So thank you for watching.